Welcome to the Future of Impact, a show where we create solutions and build a world where missions, metrics, and incentives align to actually get problems solved. We are on a mission to find innovative ways to accelerate change and make impact in industry. But we can't do it without the right metrics, and we can't do it alone. This is not a job for one or even a few. We all stand to succeed by working together. We are the future of impact. I'm your host, Jess Merrill. Let's get started. I would like to welcome my guest and friend, Meghan Ogilvie. Meghan is the Chief Executive Officer of DogTag, a 501c3 that empowers service-disabled veterans, military spouses, and caregivers through an innovative 5-month fellowship program. Hired as DogTag's first employee in 2012, Meghan partnered with DogTag's co-founders to bring their shared vision to life, to create a place that equips transitioning veterans and military families with knowledge, skills, and confidence to pursue their career goals post-service. Meghan assumed the role of CEO in 2015 and oversees all aspects of DogTag's unique, multifaceted social enterprise, including managing the fellowship program, growing DogTag Bakery, and guiding the development and implementation of DogTag's long-term strategic vision. Prior to joining DogTag, Meghan spent several years working in finance in New York, first in equities with Lehman Brothers and Barclays, and later with an executive management at Macquarie Group. Meg, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here as a longtime friend and friend of our family. It is so nice to be able to have this conversation with you. I've admired your work for many, many years, and I just am very honored to have you here to talk about it.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about the work that you're all doing. And again, it's exciting to see come back together years later and see how much we've both grown and evolved. And it's great to have that community and the network. So I'm excited to be on the show today.
Awesome. Well, as I love to start out, I think, I've mentioned a little bit in the introduction, your background and kind of history from a professional standpoint. But I always think it's really interesting to understand, someone's why that got them to where they're at today. And you have, most people's aren't a straight line. Some people's are, most people's are not. I think yours is really interesting, and it would be very valuable for people to kind of hear, how you leveraged, finding your purpose and why to get you where you're at today. If you wouldn't mind sharing that story.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're still on that story, right? We're still on that journey. And I think I've shared this before, but growing up, I'm from a military family. My father served for 26 years in the Marine Corps. My sister also served for 6 years in the Marine Corps. And my mom served for all of it, right? And the family truly does serve. While our love wasn't deployed or abroad, we're at home. And so my mom, whenever I'd leave the house, she'd always say, remember who you are, right? And it was this really kind of grounding of, one, you represent more than yourself, right? You represent your father and I, your siblings, but also, remember who you are when you're out there and there's tough decisions, that we have your back, right? And so it kind of gave me this place of grounding. And then when I was younger, I was fortunate to play soccer, and my dad's a Hall of Fame lacrosse goalie from the Naval Academy. My sister played basketball at the Naval Academy, and I got a recruitment letter from them for soccer. And it's like this really pivotal moment where I had to turn to my dad, and I just simply said, it's just not my calling. I love and respect the military, and it raised me, right? I have the values and ethos a lot from what I knew and understood from the Marine Corps and just being part of a military family, but it wasn't my calling to serve in that way. And my dad said simply, you're going to find your way to serve. And so I think whether I realized it or not, my journey was really kind of along those lines of finding my way to serve. And that looks different for everybody, right? And so I love soccer. I played professional in Iceland for a hot second. You mentioned in between moving to New York, I was a waitress. I coached 2 soccer teams. I was a substitute teacher. I worked in an insurance billing company, so there's a hustle, right? You have to have a hustle. But also part of it was kind of like, what did I find interesting during this path, right? And one of my best friends, Jess, called me and said, I need a roommate in New York. And I became a receptionist at Lehman. And I had my soccer bag out. I played pickup after work. And I was a receptionist being like, all right, let's figure this out. I'm a sociology major who played soccer, right? So here I am at Lehman in the financial world, and a managing director saw my bag. He knew a Spiders, which is Richmond. And he said, oh, you're an athlete. And we started talking, and he said, why don't you come interview for me for an analyst position in equities? And I was like, well, I don't know what equity is, right? Like I took one day of macro and was like, this stuff stinks. I am out. Give me people. I'm a people person. But again, I got the opportunity, I interviewed, and I ended up taking it. And I think, so my journey has never been direct, right? I've never really known what I wanted. But I think to maybe like the kind of core values my parents put in place, but also what I started kind of like figuring out is like, it's better to know what I don't want. Right. And so the ability to try so many different things at a young age, and put myself in positions where I don't know what I'm doing. Right. I mean, finance, I jumped on a desk as a middle office equity analyst, no idea what I was doing. Right. And, I ended up being decently successful in the sense, I stayed there until unfortunately Lehman crashed, and then Barclays, and then I made a pivot to Macquarie, which was more of kind of a working as an executive assistant, but it was for two women, a global head and a domestic head of settlement, in this high ranking kind of financial world. And I really wanted that experience to also be like an understudy. And I always feel like there's something to learn, right? I mean, again, I always know also the value of different roles. And I think what it's also taught me is the respect, right? As a receptionist, I actually was taught pretty early on that, I represent the organization, I represent the company, you're the first point of contact. I was empowered, right? And so I think my whole process, my whole journey has been like kind of on this path of like just being able to pick up from every little instance. What can I learn from it, right? What do I love about this? What I hate? And then like moving forward, right? And so I met Father Curry, our co-founder, because I was ready to kind of figure out my next steps in New York. And my best friend said, you had to come to my wedding because one, I'm a bridesmaid, but you also have to meet, this Jesuit priest who's officiating my wedding. And Father Curry was born missing his right forearm, and he had been dedicated to working with people of different abilities, and had an idea called Dog Tag Bakery. And he pitched it to me at the rehearsal dinner. And by the end of the weekend, I convinced him to hire me. Now, I'd never started a nonprofit. I definitely never worked at a bakery, even ran a bakery, much less started one. But like the excitement of what that could be when finding my purpose, right? I was really struggling in the world of finance, of understanding like, what is my why here? Why does this matter? Like, I know the economy, I know the overarching, but really for me, how was this my calling? How was I serving my community? How was I finding my way to serve? And the excitement of what dog tag could be, knowing that there was nothing in existence. It was simply an idea, and the ability not only selfishly to find my purpose, but like I could really figure this out, was so much more enticing and so much more exciting than the fear of leaving 6 years of New York and a community and a network and in a career, to be honest with you. So I don't think I have like I think again to this day, and even in leadership, I think, what I kind of say about dog tag and in the program that we run, it's like, I'm forever a student of dog tag. And I think I just want to think of myself as forever a student, because that way, it allows you to learn, right? And I think I think curiosity is the most important asset that we could bring to a conversation, to bring to work, bring to our leadership, is the ability to want to learn.
That's awesome. It makes me wonder or kind of think about the different feeling of like, kind of jumping from, it seemed like when I'm like listening to your story, even I know you, Jess is my cousin and your best friend. And like, I know you, but listening to your story kind of like from an outsider's perspective, like in this conversation, it feels a little bit like, and tell me if this sounds right, that like the same feeling you had when you got that letter to play soccer and you just knew like you could go against what probably was maybe some expectations and some disappointment and some things that were probably pretty challenging at that age. But like that purpose and that understanding that like what you were doing had a greater calling. Was that the same feeling, or kind of like, because you then, your story was like, and then you jumped on all these things and you gathered all these learnings and all that. But like, what was it at that moment that you met this? It was at a wedding, right? That you met this Jesuit priest.
I mean, I'm holding a Bud Light. I mean, it wasn't like this formal thing. Like, it wasn't like a planned interview. I just, I think the passion that he had, right? It was something that I realized, God, like that passion is addicting, right? And the excitement of what could be. So to the same point, like I knew again that to go into the military, like the academy, it's something you have to really want, right? I saw my sister go through it, and I know others have gone through it, my friends have, and I knew that it was just not my path. Like I knew in my heart and my soul, and there was no question about it in that sense. When I met Father Curry, I recognized like, this is it. Like if I'm looking for a way, if I'm looking for purpose, like this was the way to do it, even though like there was no path, right? There was really nothing ahead of us. It was just like, do you want to try? And so again, I think, that it felt so, I mean, I literally came home and turned to my roommate and I was like, I'm moving to DC, and like, I'm starting a nonprofit bakery. She's like, what happened at this wedding? But I think that's like it, right? Like it was just something that, again, like I in like my gut, and I think this is like when you have to like listen to that, right? Mm-hmm. And our gut tells us different things. My gut was like, hell yes. I mean, I'm so grateful also that I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is like, the
Ignorance is
best.
bliss.
It is, right? Because if you knew, you probably wouldn't try it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the point though. So yeah, to your point, like I think those are those moments. But I don't know if you can also know that if you haven't also gone through various, like all those different jobs I did, all those different, industries in some ways. If I hadn't had that experience, I might be second guessing myself. And this
Yeah.
was like, I didn't second guess myself. I made the decision, and 6 months later I was in DC.
You've used the term harnessing your fear. You have like a way that you explain it that I think is brilliant, that I think would be really valuable to share around like fear, like it's fearful and fear and kind of harnessing that. And like, how do you leverage that to move forward and kind of create, powerful
Yeah.
things?
I mean, fear is it's the best and the worst, right? But like you have to own it either way. And I think it's like there's sometimes this idea of like be fearless. And like I get that. And there's ways maybe in my life that I am fearless, right? But I think it's also like it feels almost irresponsible, right? Be totally fearless. Like if you're like that, like you're kind of, short lifespan or or whatever it might be. So my goal is like I think about like I don't like the focus isn't to be fearless. It's just you can't be fearful, right? So it's not like to like throw everything to caution to the wind and everything and just throw yourself at everything you can. But the goal is like you can't be fearful to try, right? So it's like finding this balance of allowing that fear to be part of it, but not like allowing it to like push you forward, right?
Yeah.
Create urgency, create that excitement, but also not allow it to overwhelm you so much that you can't take that step. And I think it's like every day whether it's in relationships or work or decisions we make, I think that idea is like just don't be fearful, right? Don't worry. Again, the idea of fearlessness can overwhelm someone. It's like fail fast, and some people that just doesn't translate to, right?
Yeah.
We don't like I don't call it failure unless if I don't learn from it. Yeah, it's definitely failure, like 100% failure. If I learn from it, I call it experience, right? That was a really important experience for me to go through where I failed miserably, right? In the sense of I didn't correct this, I didn't do that, but I'm now learning for it, and now I'm better, right? I see it all as data to make better decisions with. So again, you just can't not do, right? You can't let fear hold you so captive.
I couldn't agree more. I find that like, as you were speaking, what was coming up for me was like, I almost feel like if I'm not fearing something, then like maybe I'm not pushing myself, or maybe I'm not in the right place, or maybe I'm, like not to say that every moment of every day has to be real, like pushing yourself to the brink of your comfort zone and all that. But like in so many of the best things that ever happened in my life, there was that tinge and that kind of like walking the line of like not letting it overwhelm, but also like not stepping, like not taking the easy route.
Yeah. You've
It's a good
started so
muscle
many.
to
I mean,
build.
you started so many, right? And I think also some people are like, I'm just not built that way. And I think this is like kind of that like notion. We talk about entrepreneurial, like the entrepreneurial mindset within our organization. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. That's the truth. But this entrepreneurial mindset is kind of like, how do you solve, right? It's really about this idea of like being, like how do you actually be in situations and find resolutions for them? Finding like, how do you find like to fix the need kind of thing? And I think part of this is like that fearlessness, but like have this entrepreneurial mindset, like allow fear to be part of like guiding you and understanding like, okay, this does cause stress. This is causing bad stress, right? And I think that's also what you have to know about yourself. Like wellness is a whole component of this. I joked with my dad at one point. He's like, Marine father, super proud of his daughter, but he's also like, this is a lot. Why don't you just like, and he meant with like the most love, like, why don't you go play, like, go be a coach, like, go do something that you can have, like, it's not so stressful. And I was like, Dad, I was like, if I got like work for a bodega, I would like unionize it, right? Like, I don't have it in me
It
to
doesn't
not
matter
do
what I
this.
do. This will be the
Yeah, like,
output.
yeah, then I'm gonna build like, and again, I think it's my natural, so like some of your core values that you like, one of my core values that I have to have for myself is growth. Like I have to be growing. And that doesn't mean every second I'm, taking another course or reading, but like it's just like I need to be pushing myself. And so fear, I live with fear on a daily basis in small and big ways. And so again, it doesn't mean you have to make these massive decisions or, like you have to be an entrepreneur or you have to be starting your business, a new business. Every day, it's like, how do you think about fear and allow it to be part of the conversation, but not own you?
This is a perfect segue, like the entrepreneurship conversation into, I would love for you to really talk through the kind of like build, I mean, from scratch, like you were there when it was an idea, you took what was probably a very outdated business plan and made it, updated one and brought it to reality. But the model of dog tag as a nonprofit, like at its core is so innovative in that you describe it as a business model. Like you're not saying like, oh, you really talk about it. If you had removed the 501c3 status from it, or people knowing that, you would think it was just a regular business. I would love for you to kind of talk about like what went into and continues to go into building and running an innovative organization like Dog Tag, and also how the development of your specific metrics, like how they were developed and how they helped to drive the output of Dog Tag.
Yeah. Again, we have two co-founders, right? And their vision of this was the moment was big. And the vision was really based on teaching a man or a woman how to fish, right? The simple concept of that. And I think there's like, we have to be careful of these savior models where you go in and you give someone a tool and you teach them how to use it and then all this stuff. And then, okay, I'm done. And you take the tool with you. Right. And so it's like the savior model is not really about who you serve. It's about you. Right. And I think our model is really more based on let's making sure we're providing tools, resources in a community to make this a sustainable impact, right? To really allow people to actually get, tangible results from being in a 5-month fellowship program. So our co-founders were really deliberate with that and how they wanted to think about this. This isn't a nice thing we're doing, right? Less than 1% of our country serves in the United States military, which means 99%, to include myself, although I'm a military kid, like I chose not to, right? So 99% of our country has chosen not to, right? So part of our process is that, we recognize the transition of the military for both service member and spouse, and then even caregiver is exceptionally challenging. So post-World War II, Syracuse University through the IVMF program, they've have amazing research. So it's post-World War II, 48% of veterans started their own business, right? So amazing. Who do they hire, right? Friends, family, service buddies. Today, less than 6% of service members are starting their own business, right? Who are they hiring? Right. So that market, that network has shrunk so significantly because also the military and who's serving has shrunk. So our program was really about how do we actually make sure we bring the 99% into our program. But during that process, there's a tangible result of getting, dipping your toes back in education. So we partner with Georgetown University as well as Loyola University to provide certificates in business administration. We have a bakery that our fellows are in right now, and they're really understanding kind of the underbelly of a business. We are not expecting anyone to graduate and open up their own bakery or become a barista, whatever. If that's what they want, brilliant. Our program is really focused on kind of the third component, which is like the learning labs and networks coming in, is being able to really understand and take the time and space to develop like, what is my purpose? How do I redefine purpose? So they go through education, experiential learning, a learning lab, building a business plan, and the fifth is wellness. So over 5 months, giving a time and space for an individual to think through these questions. When you're in the service, your uniform, it says it all. It says, your rank, so level of respect, how many times you've been promoted, the way I address you is like, again, another way of determining your rank or your level of respect. And then all of a sudden you transition out and you're wearing a blazer and you're saying, my name is Megan, right? And a job fair. Like you've lost identity, you've lost purpose, you lost that community. And that's lonely, right? For anyone. So we think of it as a cultural shift. You're going from one culture to a different culture, and think about the societal norms, the dress code, the simplicity of that is yet so stark, right? The military is so efficient because it's black and white, and when you get out, it's all gray, and it's all different levels and shades of it. And so our program is how do we address this in a way that's tangible for those that are really want to move forward. So we see ourselves as kind of positive disruptors in the space of how we think about transition. Transition is in a week or 6 months after you get out of the military. And for the military spouse, it's also this transition of them going back into the workforce, or them being able to take advantage of the time for themselves to actually build a business, and the caregivers as well. So our goal is like, we want to build tangible ways that our fellows can actually do that.
And you've talked about like the, some organizations by nature of the cause, or just like their way that they focus their energy are, I think the analogy used was like 100 feet wide and 5 feet deep, or miles or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And that how you guys are really like in tune and focused on 100 feet deep and 5 feet wide.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like how you kind of came to that determination of like, that was the right way to approach it, knowing that I'm sure in any space, when there's like more people that need what you're doing, could impact, I'm sure it's really hard not to feel like, let's try to like be everything to everyone.
Yeah. I think that's a common issue, right? So yeah, mile wide, inch deep, right? Like you do a little bit of everything, but nothing well, or nothing like you don't have time to do everything, like to actually dig in. So our fellowship was very much intentional. We started with 10 fellows in our first class, right? We now have, 26 today. We're running 2 cohorts. Soon we'll have 32 and based out of Chicago and DC. But we've grown that intentionally, right? It took us 8 years to expand to another cohort. But I think but what we realize is that we're investing in people, and people are complex. And they also, the process that we're going through, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes money, right? To be able to have the resources to provide that. So our goal has always been, success is defined by each individual. So a fellow might come in, right? And part of their transition to the military, or even, is that they have a new normal, whether it's physical, emotional, cognitive, they're changed, right? And so the services or the level they used to be able to, compete at is now changed drastically. So now, they might have been a helicopter pilot in the Army, and now they come out and they thought they were going to be in the Pentagon or working for a government contract. They actually physically, emotionally, cognitively, like I said, they actually don't have it. It's no longer a reality. So now again, how do you readjust that? How do you rethink that? How do you actually think of not, this is what I'm unable to do, but now I'm able to do this? So our goal is like, how do we refocus that, right? So then when we think about metrics, right? Some people say, okay, we'll go out, if they get a job, it's success. Don't deny that employment's exceptionally helpful and financial means are 100% priority, right? What we see though is that doesn't necessarily mean success for transition, right? People haven't gone through a process to evaluate what they want, what they don't want. What are their values today? What are their values moving forward? What it actually, again, redefining this purpose. How do they rebuild the community that they want to be part of? That's not, that's not socks. I can't export that. I can't do 10,000 more, like 10 cents cheaper, right? That's the human element, the complexity of it. And we value that. So we invest in people, right? We invest in that time and energy with them. And our goal is that when we invest in them, this is just the beginning. The first 5 months is the beginning. And once they move forward and move on, they've built the plan within Dog Tag to what they want and what it looks like, then the ripple effect starts, right? They go back into their community and they find a new way to serve, right? They reconnect with family, they build new relationships, they build authentic and genuine relationships that are not military based, or, so again, the difference is kind of more this level of like qualitative than quantitative at times as well.
And how do you guys like measure the ripple effect outside of, like, once they leave the fellowship, like what happens with the relationship between, them and Dog Tag?
So, it's a great question in the sense that, that's one of the hardest things is kind of measurement, right? So we originally had a kind of a measurement of like, okay, X amount employed, X amount back in school, and X amount starting entrepreneurial journey. But it kind of was like, that's not the real data, because our program has really like a different type of methodology, right? That doesn't mean success to us. Success is, like we talked about, kind of building genuine relationships, the confidence to advocate for oneself, the self-reflection, the actualization that happens, the confidence in, being able to find your voice really in that. And that's all like kind of the soft skills, power skills that then go out into the workforce. They'll go, goes back into the community. So when we think about, again, our own metrics, it's along those lines of making sure they represent actually how our program is run, right? It's not just this, unemployment for veterans is like 3%, right? Unemployment for military spouses is 20% in a good market. So again, part of our program is really to be current, be reflective. We do a ton of surveying before, like during the program. We also partner with Rand Corporation to making sure they actually did. We had them come in, and what they did is they did 6 focus groups. They did about 6 to 10 individual phone calls. They took all the trends of what the impacts were, and then we built a survey out of that. And then we actually now survey on an annual basis to our alumni. But we have alumni programming. We have a monthly Zoom call. We have in-person events. We're having one tonight. We have what we call an advisorship. So an individual who teaches during the program on the business planning is actually, once they graduate at no cost to them, they actually can sign up for an hour a week if they want and meet with this individual to talk about professional development and growth. We also have a mentorship program with, older alumni or those that have graduated, then partner up with a newly released alumni. So if you just graduate, you can partner with somebody who's been out for a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, just to have that relationship, just to kind of have that, like, hey, the transition of 5 months, 4 days a week to now not have anything. What is, So we've built really like in the power of our program is actually the power of our alumni. They're hiring each other, right? They're supporting each other. They're going to each other's grand openings of a bakery shop that just happened like 2 months ago. They're going to Pete's Farm for Fields for Valor. They're promoting Ophi's wedding business, right? And that's not me driving that, right? That's when you start building a community, you allow them to have those tools, but you build the trust. The goal is that's sustainability right now. Because now there's movement. Now there's forward momentum that they are creating and that they're able to kind of keep going forward.
I love that. It's in a couple conversations we've had on the show, this general theme of like caring about the human and the human connection, and then trusting humans to be the best of what humans are seems to be a common thread. If I think about the stories where people share like best examples of like how, whether that's from how they impacted someone's life for the community they serve, how they engage with their team, how they worked with their clients, or how they've, worked with funders. You and I have had interesting conversations around this idea of the funder relationship. Obviously, for us, that has been the core of what we do in order to be successful with our clients, which is like, how do you get within 1 degree of really everything, right? Like the work that you're doing on the community level. And then as it relates to, for our work, grant funding, it's like, if you have that human connection, then everything that's meant to be follows pretty smoothly versus it being this really like kind of like, laborious process. You've described it as, looking for funding partners versus like just a funder. Yeah. Can you talk about like, it sounds like it's a similar way that you approach the way that like, instead of doing these 3 services to deliver these 3 metrics for our programming, you treat people like humans. How does that translate on the funding side?
Yeah, I think, the concept of nonprofit was really created, right? Because to fill the gaps of what the government wasn't covering, right, from a financial standpoint and programmatically. And so nonprofits are based on, the reliability of individuals, foundations, corporations, like kindness, right? And there's no shortage of needs, right? There's no shortage of opportunities to support a good organization. And so I do think, how we think about partnerships and funding, it's relationships. And you and I talked about this. I mean, you kind of hit so hard on it last time we chatted about it. And I think, the goal isn't like, this word, it's like, it's not the sexy word, but it's the real word, is sustainability. And if you don't build, like, again, what we've really focused on is like, what are the right partnerships, right? How are we also like, how does our program also help solve for others? Right. So how do we make this like, how do we think about the connections, not from just come fund us because we need money, right, to keep the lights on and keep the program running, but it's also like, how do you actually get involved? So what we each actually are learning labs, right? We have anything from individuals, corporations, foundations. So for instance, we started working with like Boeing, right? And Boeing's right across the water. Their office is right in Virginia. And they came in and they did everything from kind of like, again, anything from like lobbying and like understanding Congress and understanding how that works, because that's the biggest area. And then they came in and did an event here where they volunteered, and then they got to like, so the more we can bring like, partners in, or, Wendy Muma, who started her own coaching business, and she is integral to our fellowship to coming in. And yet she donates her services, right? So I think part of how we think about funding and kind of these relationships is, making sure it's the right funding. And I know like, it sounds like, I don't want to sound cavalier, but like, you have to be careful to make sure that there's an agreement of what the needs are on both sides, because otherwise you make an agreement and then you might be building a second program just to fill the needs of that funding. Yeah. And now the biggest issue, what you can see, especially in fundraising for nonprofits, is mission creep, right? People start having a mission creep because they're like, well, we need money, and this person's willing to pay for dog tag to, do a kid program, for military kids. Like, what I'll do is I'll say, that's a great idea. Here are 3 organizations that we really value in the military kid space, and you should definitely talk to them, right? Because that amount of time and energy to try to even convince them or convince us, it's just like, it's a moot point, right? And so I think that's also like in the nonprofit space is like trying to figure out like the competitive nature of funding, right? With funders and nonprofits, but also building this ecosystem. So it's like, like rising tide lifts all ships. I mean, we partner really well with other VSOs or veteran service organizations because we don't want to do what they do. We want them to be excellent, and I want them to rely on us to be excellent. So I think it's part of the funding side is trying to find those that are, I say this with great respect, kind of like evolving, right? They're thinking differently about funding. They're not just thinking about like, how do I put my name on a plaque or put it behind, you know, an event? It's kind of thinking about, how do I want to change my community? How do I want to be part of that change? How do I actually want to know and see it? And again, I think it's challenging at times for sure.
Yeah. It's we have, our community is intended to be, very broad, like broadly focused on
Yeah.
impact, because I think there's so many people, and especially as the industry evolves, that are impacted and interested and want to be a part of this. And funders are
Yeah.
certainly, a huge piece of that, whether it's the more traditional, kind of like longer standing types of funders like private foundations, corporate funders, stuff like that. And then also these kind of new funders that are coming in, whether it's generationally new or just people who, fell into some sort of wealth that, are looking to give. I think that's a really great point. I love the idea of mission creep, like that concept of like being aware of that. And like from a funding perspective is kind of like being aware of that as well, to like make sure that you're not contributing to that, that you're not asking some, that there could be accountability on both sides to, clarity around mission, and then making sure that those missions are aligned so that you're doing, that you're not being inefficient with your investment.
Yeah, and I think it's like also like, so the dynamic of like different funders. We have an amazing partnership with like Wounded Warrior Project, and they fund our fellowship, and they very clearly want to make sure it stays within like stipends, right? Our fellows receive a stipend to be in the program every month, so it's not a financial burden over the course of 5 months, and that's really intentional in how they want to engage. And we actually use them for like direct mental health services and physical health services. We have a partner like Clark Family Foundation, which is a spend down foundation, right? They have X amount of dollars, and in 10 years, it's all meant to be spent, because Mr. Clark wanted to make sure that like once he passed, and sadly did, that those on the board he still knew, and like that it stayed relevant, right, to what he cared about. So we've been really fortunate in like what they care about is their community. And so what they invested in us with is like infrastructure, right? Like, which is phenomenal, right? It has allowed us to grow a second cohort in Chicago, allows us to, build greater infrastructure and sustainability within, to be able to manage all of this. And so I do think that's also like, it's like kind of a dating and dance tear, like everyone can't be in the same funding street. You have to think about the needs, but so you both need funding for the program, but you also need funding just to, again, really operate, right? Build infrastructure. Again, not every funder thinks that's exciting, and it doesn't have the flash to it, but it does have, again, the longevity. And that's our goal, is really making sure there's longevity to what we do, because in any nonprofit and any service you provide, if you don't take it with a seriousness and you are irresponsible with it, the detriment that it can do in the trust building of that community is permanent. And so for us, it's like it would be a disservice to those that we're serving today if we don't think this strategically and build towards a sustainable future.
So, and this just kind of popped in my head, because this is like such an important component of how a nonprofit runs. And I have just realized that we don't really talk about it often on this show, but like running such an innovative business model of an organization, what is the board's involvement, and like, how do you build a board, maintain a board, like evolve one, knowing that you're doing something so different, in such a different way? Like, what does that look like for you guys, and how has it changed over the years, if at all?
Yeah, I've been exceptionally grateful for our board. When you first start, it's like family and friends, right? It's kind of like Father Curry's family and friends. And then we met our co-founder, Connie, Ambassador Millsy now, it became some of her partners that came in. And that's the reality. Like you need people behind you. And you have an accountant on your board, right? Because you need someone to help you start your financial like books, and open a bank account. You get a lawyer, we started because the 501c paperwork, your 1023, like, so when you first start, you kind of are like, you're really bringing them in for like the utility of what they can do and the expertise that they have, right? And then it kind of evolves to being like, okay, we're starting this program, and so it becomes almost, a bit more like almost operational, right? Okay, this is how we're putting it in place, and like the board is part of that kind of almost operational. Again, I'm fortunate the DogTech's board is a bit more strategic and oversight now. So we have committees, right? So we have a finance committee, we have an HR and compensation committee, we have a program committee. We have, I think, a governance committee as well, and now a development committee. And so part of that is that trying to, right, you want to bring board members on. This is our approach, right? We have a whole metrics of what we don't have on our board, like from everything from like expertise, location, age, demographic, race, and ethnicity. You have to, right? Because you also look at who you serve. And so this has been one of the more challenging things in some ways, because you're looking for expertise in different spaces, right? And The board, owns the organization. Like I've been with Dog Tag since day one, right? First employee. This is Dog Tag. I work for Dog Tag, right? And the board of directors owns the organization, right? So it's a great responsibility of who's on your board, because they, in fact, are in charge of it. They own it, and they make the decisions along those lines. So my role with the board is really making sure that I have full transparency in different areas, specifically as committee areas, especially, but that there's a quarterly check-in or quarterly board meeting, not even check-in, that we have. And again, it's really to make sure there's transparency. I reach out to board members individually for counsel consistently, right? I see them all as mentors, but they all bring different background experience, and that's what you need from a board. So, yes, I have 15 bosses, right? For sure. And I'm very well aware of that. But I also really see it as a tool. Like again, 15 mentors that as I, go through different challenges, I really rely on them for that. So I do think it takes effort. I think, Dog Tag is in a new phase with our board, I'd say, and building kind of this really strong rapport amongst other board members, building up the committees to be more engaged in their areas of expertise and bringing that to board meetings. So we're in our own kind of phase of that right now. I'd say that's an area of like education for me. I'm good at logistics. I'm good at getting this stuff, but you're managing up too. And I think that's something, it's a delicate balance of making sure there's respect, but also on both sides, right? So yeah. I've been really fortunate for that.
That's awesome. I love that. As we are wrapping up, I would love to hear from you. I can only imagine, being with an organization that does the work that you do and running it the way that, you and the board run it, the amount of stories you've had that have just changed your life, touched your life. If you could think of one to share of essence of Dog Tag that's stands out to you, not to put you on the spot with one story, but I think it's to share that human element. You kind of touched on some examples throughout of how they work together or kind of businesses that they've started. But I just think that I would love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I have to be careful because it's like choosing your favorite kid.
Yeah.
Right. And I think most recently we had a military spouse that came into our program that, had an idea of kind of being, working with soon to be moms and the health and wellness, and there's more to it, but she was one very quiet, and it's almost like she had dimmed her light so much that it was hard to see her, right? She came into our program and kept being like, well, I'm not a mom, so I can't do this, right? Or I'm not a mom, so I shouldn't be able to. And it's not imposter syndrome, but it's kind of along those lines. I mean, she came into our program and she sat taller, right? Within weeks, she was she was speaking so much more articulate. She's now graduating from the, Georgetown certificate program in wellness, and specifically in supporting mothers. She's running a business. They're potentially going to be doing that in the near future. Again, from the beginning, we had Pete Scott, who was Army, did special forces work, and part of his kind of where he found most peace was outside, right? So he actually became a farmer. And he started a nonprofit called Fields for Valor. And he walked in day one and was like, who are you? What's your deal? I was like, all right, let's see how this is going. And it's just trust, right? There was a lack of trust. There's a distrust in the community in different ways. So, he started that. He started in Dog Tag. He started Fields for Valor. And he's now bought a second farm. He's created a CSA. He's training veterans in farming. He has chickens. We have Aaron Roth, who came into our program and 20 years in the Army, went into the culinary field and was like, hey, listen, I've already kind of built my business plan. This will sharpen me up. By the time she graduated, her business plan was doubled in size. Her budget had tripled in size. But just about 3 months ago, she opened up her own space in Tyson's Corner. Right. We have Rachel, who's in the Navy, and Rachel's 4'10" on wearing heels, but she doesn't wear heels. She's fully tatted up and she's this rock star, and she came to our program and had gone through some significant stuff, but recognized that she is really talented as a chef. And so she actually has graduated and she's running her own business in Staunton, Virginia. But then you also have Ann Barley, right? Exceptionally efficient in a helicopter pilot. Due to trauma and service, she no longer could operate that level, right? So she's so articulate and she has this beautiful mind. She writes stories all the time. And now she's a storyteller, right? So she might not be working every day like a 9 to 5, but she's working her ass off every day, right? And developing her craft. And again, there's so many, that I could pull from.
I could tell you could just go, if we sat here for 10 more hours, you would just keep going.
I just feel like it's such an honor, right? I think that's what it, that is the greatest joy, that I think the greatest responsibility, like to be part of someone's journey. And we are not the journey. We are part of it. We did not own it. They did it, right? They earned it. They graduated our program. They are doing the work every single day. And we get to be on that to like be affirming and reaffirming and cheerleaders sometimes. Like we all need cheerleaders. And I just think like, wow, what an honor, right? How fortunate that I get to be part of their lives in a small way, as well as all of our team members, right? So yeah, I mean, we speak about it with the joy and of gratitude, to be honest with you, because it's amazing. People are amazing, right? And we need to remember that too. So yeah, I could go on, and like I know I'm gonna get some stuff like crap from like that was like some of the earlier fellows with the newer. Like I mean, again, we've just under 200 alumni.
Yeah.
So there's amazing stories.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would just want to thank you. I'm so glad that, Impact brought us back together in kind of this space of finding your why and your purpose. And it's been so fun to, kind of watch more from afar. And I'm glad that we're now more closely connected again. And I can't wait to see, what you do, what Dog Tag does, and just kind of that journey and continue to follow that journey. The, kind of three, if I could think of like the three biggest things that stood out to me, and I took like a million notes because I'm like, we got to look into this. I know this is great. I have to talk about this. We have to, put this in front of our clients of like just ideas. But,
yeah,
number one, I would say is like, following your intuition and defining your why and letting that guide your journey. Mm-hmm. I think two is just like the really practical approach and kind of talking about like, understanding like the visionary component of what your co-founders did, and then how you were kind of the implementer that came in and was able to bring it to life, and your dedication and commitment to like continually learning to be able to make sure that you're at the forefront of where you need to be in order to lead that organization. And then the organization's ability to deliver that for so many people who are in such a transitional time in their life and who have given so much to our country. That so many, like you said, 99% plus, chose not to. And then I think, the other thing, aside from just like, now I'm like, I'm going to like talk more because I want to hear more of these stories, is again, this idea of like really being clear on what your mission is and identifying partners that, whether it's on the funding side, that are aware of that and help support so that you can stay. I love the mission creep concept, but like you can stay really like locked in on your mission, but also this idea of an ecosystem, building an ecosystem around a cause. And, so often it's looked at as competition, and organizations fear working with each other. That was another good thing we touched on, was like harnessing fear, but like they don't, because of the competitive landscape of accessing funding. And I think the fact that you guys have been able to kind of harness that in a really powerful way to leverage this unique skill sets and subject matter expertise of each organization that make up, because that person, that military member, that active duty spouse, they don't care what the dynamics of all of these organizations are. They just need the support. And so it's really 100%. Like such amazing leadership to see that and to kind of find other partners who see it that way. So like I said, I can't thank you enough. I'm sure there's going to be many people who are interested in connecting with you and with Dog Tag. If they would like to do so, what is the best way to connect to learn more?
Yeah. So if anything about, Dog Tag, our website is just www.dogtaginc.org. Check us out there, obviously on social media. We're Dog Tag Bakery on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook and Instagram. You can we have weekly wrap-ups from our fellows. So, I mean, on all platforms, we really try to make sure we share the program as well as our delicious products. So you can order baked goods at the same time. But yeah, also I'm on LinkedIn, right? So please, I mean, again, I would love to reach out. I mean, I'm so grateful for you, Jess, for starting, One Degree, because also like, this is what nonprofits need. We need really constructive partners in the space to help us think strategically about funding and finding that, right? And so that connector is 100%, vital, what I'd say. So I'm so grateful that you're in the space too. I know whoever all your clients are fortunate to have you guys. And again, I think this is coming together to talk about impact and kind of purpose is always a joy of mine as well. So thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
For sure. Loved it. It was wonderful. You've been listening to The Future of Impact. To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show in your favorite podcast player or our YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow The Future of Impact on Instagram, LinkedIn, or even on TikTok for bonus content and sneak peeks on next week's episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time.